हाँ, प्रणाम राजेश बाबू।
सर का लगता है म्यूट है। प्रणाम सर।
हाँ राजेश बाबू म्यूट किए तुमने।
जी सर, जी सर, जी
प्रणाम। देखते हैं जरा रास्ते में, तुरंत ही हो तो वहाँ पहुँचते हैं तो ठीक से।
जी सर, जी सर, जी सर, जी सर।
मैडम का म्यूट है क्या? आवाज नहीं सुनाई दे रही।
हाँ, हम म्यूट करके रखे हुए थे थोड़ा। असल में 12 o'clock तक क्लास कॉमर्स का होता है ना, उसके बाद तो हम लोग को रूम मिलता है। दिस इज द प्रॉब्लम विद अस। Anyway, we can start now.
Yes, we can start now.
We can start now.
Right.
A very warm welcome to Professor Bhavatosh Indraguru, the external examiner.
Thank you very much, madam. Thank you.
And all those who have joined. And all welcome Ph.D. Viva-Voce. So first, we will Dr.
मेरे हस्बैंड को बोल देना, मेरे हस्बैंड और सिस्टर्स।
First of all, I always I said to Professor and all dear students. So I am going to read the reports of Priti Kumari Choudhary. And I read reports. And I start with the report by the supervisor, Professor Samir Kumar Sharma. And he said that this is in the exam
रोनित को दे दे, रोने लगे कि वो बाहर लेके चला जाएगा। रोने लगेगी तो बाहर लेके उधर पड़ा, क्योंकि यहाँ प्रोफेसर बैठे कपड़ा नीचे तो बाहर लेके चला। यहाँ से निकलने में आसान होगा जब रोने लगे।
The researcher has applied various theories in order to understand the third chapter, custom and political existence of business women in Sudan are life apart. And autobiography starts with
वो लोग थोड़ा आइसोलेटेड फील हो जाएगा ना कि वो लोग अलग बैठा दिया हमको। बढ़िया थी ज़्यादा अच्छा।
The researcher has suggested certain ways and means of achieving gender equality. She has given biographical details of Prabha and
नहीं, हम फोन से जुड़ गए, ब्लूटूथ कनेक्ट भी कर लें। प्रीति चौधरी देख लो। प्रीति चौधरी नहीं दिख रहा आपको? He sent to both.
Indian feminism and framework that of their analysis, analysis, in order to understand philosophy about pursuit and duty, moving from darkness to light, animality in man and man's nature. Chapter 5, Revolt Against Convention and Depiction of Womanly Desire in Kamala Das's My Story, is an analysis of my story from feminist perspective. The researcher considers it as a revolt against conformist conventions of the Malayali society for its setup, norms, codes of conduct, and rules and regulations put on women. And chapter 6, narrative style, is a study of the style used by 3 writers in their autobiographies. Each of them has distinct style to convey her message to the readers effectively. And the final chapter, that is conclusion, is summing up of the preceding chapters of the thesis. The researcher has mentioned the scope for the research that can be undertaken on the works of the 3 writers from eco-critical as well as psychoanalytic perspectives. And finally, he says, seeing the qualities like systematic analysis, lucid language, and persuasive power of the thesis, I recommend the award of Ph.D. degree to the research scholar Priti Kumari Choudhary. The second report I am going to read is by Professor Bhavatos Indraguru, Professor and Head, Department of English and Other European Languages, Dr. Hari Singh Gaur, University, Madhya Pradesh. And he says, the thesis entitled Autobiographies of Indian Women Writers, a study of Amrita Pritam, Prabha Khaitan, Indira Goswami, and Kamala Das, is a committed piece of research. In this thesis, the author has examined the way in which the experience of the author goes on to be transmuted into private and personal agonies, while the concerned author lives her life in accordance with the state of society and the period of time. In an autobiography, the author is primarily very reflective. She goes on to explore her creativity in reference to intense subjectivity. In the process, she discovers what is stated being the self. The self is primordial and fundamental to the existence of human beings, yet the same self is tuned outwards in the form of consciousness and chooses to develop the concepts to take a stock of sensibles. This is the primary assumption underlying all autobiographical writings, and in authors such as Amrita Pritam, Prabha Khaitan, Indira Goswami, and Kamala Das, we can understand that it is ultimately the self that goes on to become distinct for the basis, and the very basis of identity sought and achieved by the author herself. And finally, Sir says that I shall therefore choose to strongly recommend the thesis for the award of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in English of Patna University, Patna, subject to successful Viva-Voce examination. And the third report I am going to read is by Professor Sri Govind Puri, Professor in the Department of English and Modern European Languages, University of Lucknow. And he says the thesis entitled Autobiographies of Indian Women Writers, a study of Amrita Pritam, Prabha Khaitan, Indira Goswami, and Kamala Das, carried out under the supervision of Professor Samir Kumar Sharma, is a good piece of work. The researcher Priti Kumari Choudhary has submitted the thesis to the Department of English, Patna University, Patna, for award of the PhD degree in English. The thesis is divided into 7 chapters, including the introduction and conclusion. And he says the first chapter of the thesis highlights the tradition and ongoing development of Indian culture, civilization, and heritage. The researcher has also referred autobiographies written by men, which would give other side reality of the time. She has connected her research to the present time by referring the waves of feminism. She has referred some authoritative critics, their views and ideas for establishing research arguments of the thesis. The second chapter is developed on the theory of self and identity, for which she has selected Amrita Pritam's autobiography. In the third chapter, she has contextualized Prabha Khetan's autobiography to prove her arguments. The fourth and fifth chapters are based on Indira Goswami and Kamala Das autobiographies. Each autobiography qualified with a major theme and tradition. In summing up, she has justified her views with appropriate critical arguments, idioms, as well as illustrations. And finally, Sir says, therefore, I recommend that the candidate be awarded the Ph.D. degree in English of Patna University, Patna. So these are the three reports, and all reports are in favor of the research scholar. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramhit Chopal. I now request Priti Kumar Choudhary to make her presentation.
Good afternoon, esteemed professor, eminent external, beloved dear students. I, Priti Kumari Choudhary, worked under the supervision of Dr. Professor Samir Kumar Sharma in the Department of English, Patna University, Patna. Today, I am here to defend my PhD thesis. As Sir has given, am I audible? Okay, as Sir has actually briefed out the sum up of all those 7 chapters in synchronization. So apart from that, I'm going to focus on the other sections of the thesis that I worked on. Likewise, I applied 2 major theories in order to build all those 4 select primary texts. The first primary text that I dealt with. Am I good to go?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, thank you, sir. So in order to deal with all those 4 primary texts that I covered up in the thesis, the first one is the Prabha Khetan's autobiography, A Life Apart. Second one, Amrita Pritam's. And the third one is Kamala Das. The last one is Indira Goswami. What I did, I have selected all those 4 autobiographies from the same eras, same centuries, in order to limit the research. 2 theories that I applied in this thesis, one is Indian feminism and the second one is autobiography criticism. As we know, autobiography criticism is one of the most emerging theory in the contemporary era. And the Indian feminism, now we have the conceptualized versions of Indian feminism. So in that, I have covered all those decades. But in case of autobiography criticism, I just took one wave of autobiographic criticism, that is the third wave of autobiographic criticism. Why so? The reason is that in the first wave and the second wave, respectively, of autobiographic criticism, I didn't find any women critic, women theorist, or women autobiographies, whether from India or from the West. The third wave of autobiographic criticism is all about women's autobiographies in India as well as in West. West mainly comprises your America and the Britain's autobiographies. In my thesis, in the very first chapter, the introductory one, I have covered the origin and development of autobiographies. Likewise, we know that how St. Augustine's Confessions is one of the very prominent autobiography we have. In first chapter also, I have compared and contrast Indian man and women autobiographies in respect to Western autobiographies. Certain specimen that I took in order to compare and contrast is Walter Benjamin's autobiography, then Nikola Tesla autobiography, R.K. Narayan, one of the beloved author of India's, his autobiography. In comparison to that, I also discussed autobiographies of all those 4 women literary writers. Apart from that, in first chapter, I also briefed out history of Indian feminism in India. Likewise, when we talk about Indian feminism, we in general covered only 20th centuries, women's involvement in Indian politics, Indian organizations, Indian movements. So Indian autobiographies, actually, we can say that is one of the part of also Indian feminism. Why so? Because once British had left this country, we have a full-fledged development of women's autobiography in every zones of India. whether it's West Bengal or Assam, Punjab, everywhere we have the full-fledged development of Indian women's autobiographies. In the same pattern, I also covered and discussed 20 narrative techniques that I actually implied in order to brief out all those elements of Indian autobiographies. Likewise, how man's autobiographies and the elements of man autobiographies are different from elements of women autobiographies. So 20 narrative strategy I applied there. And with that also certain tenets of Indian feminism. In first chapter also I discussed about aims and objectives, maybe the results of the research that I actually hypothesized that this is going to be the result, but certain results actually changed while doing the research during the process of the thesis writing. Followed by second chapter. So what I did, actually I made a synchronizations in second, third, fourth, and fifth. All those chapters is all about one autobiographies of Indian women. I dedicated one chapter likewise to Amrita Pritam, then followed by Prabha Khaitan, then followed by Indira Goswami. In the same pattern, the last one is all about Kamala Das. So I started doing critical analysis and textual interpretation of all those women autobiographies. And in order to give certain weightage to all those 4 women autobiographies, what I did, advised by Stuti ma'am, that just don't go with textual analysis and critical analysis, also do certain theoretical interpretation. So what I did, I actually do certain stylistics, narrative techniques I applied. I tried to find out whether there are certain examples of uses of figure of speech or figures of speech, or you can say the prosody, imagery, flashback technique, flash forward technique, all those things, tone, narration, voices. These also I included in a separate chapter named Narrative Technique, chapter number 6. The last chapter is the conclusory chapter. In conclusion, likewise advised by the then HOD of the department, Arjun sir, every time you do certain research or thesis writing, come up with certain scope for other research and the results of the research. So I started not with Western feminism, but the tenets of Indian feminism. I delved into the certain waves of Indian feminism, but I actually generated one new concept while dealing with all those 4 textual texts. And this is your Indian womenism. As we know, Alice Walker, everyone knows about her, that how Alice Walker actually talked about concepts of womenism in the realm of Western feminism, like Black feminism. So in order to generate a new concept in the tenets of Indian feminism, what I did, I actually tried to apply, can I form, the very first question I asked myself while writing the thesis, can I form Indian womenism in order to dealing with Indian feminism? So what I found out while dealing with the lives and the times and the socio-cultural, political, religious environment of these 4 women writers, that yes, these writers are not just, you can say, liberal Indian feminists, they are more Indian womenists. Anyone can ask you how Indian womenism is different from Indian feminism. Likewise, we know just by looking at the conditions and women questions and lives of Indian women, that we have more traits of Indian womenism instead of Indian feminism. How Indian feminism is different from Western feminism and all those 4 waves of feminism. Why Indian women has different cultures, impact, socio-political impact. How we are more, we can say, not just traditional women or modern women. We are traditionally modified modern women. In our home, just by sitting at our home, we can say that our generations of women, whether it's your grandmothers or your mothers, including you in the present contemporary era, we 3 generations of women, we have our own way of tackling women's issues in our day-to-day occurrences. So these are the things that I found out, that why Prabha Khaitan. Likewise, there are certain similarities and dissimilarities in all those 4 women literary writers. Likewise, you know, Kamala Das, why she was so one of the polemical writer of Indian literary text, you can say the Indian literary phenomena, because of her religious conversion, and also why she was so blunt, outspoken, and she wrote, in the word of Helen Sisu, we can say, she wrote through her body. Her confessional poems are so popular. And why anyone can ask that why we need to focus on autobiography instead of other aware of or the works of these writers. Because whenever you read any authors, whenever you read about any poems or novels or drama, the very first thing we look into is their autobiographical sketches. So, you know, even in order to write any answer script, we follow all those background informations of writer. That makes autobiography one of the prominent non-fictitious texts to deal with in order to even know all those literary texts written by these authors. These were the things that I found out. And there are many scopes that I actually left as open-ended questions. I dealt all those 4 texts with the application of only 2 theories. But there are other theories that future scholars can apply in order to deal with these 3-4. There are psychoanalytical criticism. Queer study is also one of the prominent theory that you can apply as a future scholar. Why so? Because what I found out that the husband or the spouse of Kamala Das, he was bisexual. That I came to elements. We have segments of women. One is women and one is unmarried women. But in this segment, we also have widow. One of the other divisions of this autobiography is your class division or caste division. Like how these 4 writers, they are from different caste, different class, different socio-political background, different religious affinities are there in their cases. These things makes these authors different from one another, but still, these are women authors, so there must be certain similarities. So these are the things that I dealt and analyzed while writing the thesis. And I can also say that what I found out, I started with certain aims and objectives, that these are going to be very radical women authors or radical feminists in the scenario of Indian feminism. But what I found out as a result, they are liberal feminist, as well as they are more womanist in comparison to feminist. What about the autobiographical criticism? Likewise, autobiography is a very, you can say, very controversial non-fiction text. You can ask the questions that why we need to rely on autobiographies. Is there 10% of relevant elements in autobiography? Can we say that all those things that you read as a research scholar in all those 4 autobiographies are actually valid or reliable? Those there are many questions that I actually make as a problematic questions, that there are so many tenets or features or characteristics of these 4 autobiography that I am still thinking on that. Maybe in future I will deal with it. These are the things. And in the conclusion, what I did, as advised by one of the professors from this department, I did compare, and I actually contrasted and compared all those 4 texts based on their lives, based on their backgrounds, based on their experiences. And I also left certain open-ended questions for future scholars. These were the things that I dealt in this text. Thank you so much. So, okay.
I now request the external examiner, Professor to put questions to Priti Kumari Choudhary.
I now request Professor Bhavatosh Indraguru
Yes. At the
to
outset,
put
I should
questions
like...
to Priti Kumar Choudhary.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
At the outset, I should like to congratulate the research scholar for having done such a committed piece of research. And I have just a question. And the question is like this: what may be the nature of an experience which we call autobiographical? What may be the nature of an experience which we call autobiographical?
All right. Thank you, sir. Okay. So, sir, likewise, earlier we had autobiographical novels, and in the present time we have autobiographies. So if we say autobiographical means to say there are certain fictitious elements, but there are also certain non-fictitious elements, and we try to write it in the pattern of either novels or poetry. So it can be in one of the example of autobiographical element.
No, by that I should like to mean if at all it is contradicted or not contradicted. Does it undergo contradiction on account of author's interaction with the world, or it doesn't undergo any contradiction whatsoever? That is my question.
Yes, so
if it is pure or if it is impure.
In case of autobiographical, we can say it is not pure, it is impure, because we can say that there are 50% of fiction and non-fiction. But in case of autobiography in general, there are more non-fictitious elements, but still there are certain fictitious element. It depends on the author. How much he or she tries to
Then my question once again is, how far such a record of statements is reliable? If it is impure, then how far an author is reliable? As in when author becomes autobiographical.
Yeah. So this is one of the very ziggling question even I tackled with, that how much we can rely on any autobiographies. There are facts. We can say that there are facts, but there are also certain elements in autobiographies we can question as a critical reader or as a critical thesis researcher. So even though I actually dealt with all those 4 texts, but still I can ask myself whether I can trust on all those elements that is actually been dealt in all those 4 primary sources. So 100% I cannot say that all those elements are factually best or reliable, but there are, we can say that maximum number of chances are there that we can rely on them, because they actually wrote those autobiographies by keeping us as target, we can say readers or target observer, and they try to reveal as much as possible. But we can always question them as autobiographers.
All right, that's all from my side.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Now I request all the research scholars present and all the MA students present to put questions to Priti Choudhary.
Yes, still there are chances of improvement in the thesis. Your suggestion will be very valuable. We face them, otherwise they would not pose a question.
Please ask.
Mount Everest before them. You will challenge to them. Yes. They know how to handle the challenges.
I taught most of you. Please ask questions, share your suggestions for improvement. Yeah, go. Pardon, what you want to ask? Be very clear. Yeah. Are you asking about a novel or art? Okay, which one? Can you name? My story is not a novel, it's an autobiography. Obviously. It's not a novel.
It's autobiography. Anyway, why do you want to escape? Answer the question.
Obviously, thank you. I will answer you. Okay.
Let them ask any question from any genre. You have to be better.
All right, please sit down. So first of all, you mentioned that Kamala Das is one of the prominent figure, one of the most popular Indian authors he was. So how her life, she was even on the central stage in order to write my story. Do you want to ask that how she, as being at the center stage, at the centrifugal force in the autobiography, she influences other women authors? Is this your questions?
You just speak up.
All right, whatsoever I understood. Okay, whatsoever I understood from your points of view is that even though I try to make a sense in the novel is that Kamala Das is not any, you can say, radical Indian feminist. Even she had a very contradictory life. And she even tried to juggle up with all those life incidences and experiences. So I can say that even though she is an example of Indian womanist, Indian liberal feminist, she actually influences other women of her time. Even in the present time, one of the memoir written by one of the closest friend of Kamala Das, Marilyn Westwood, she actually dealt with this thing that why we consider Kamala Das autobiography as one of the example of autobiographical novel instead of autobiography. But she also was at this capacity that she influences lot many women of her generations. And even in the present time, she actually inspires us because with her confessional writings, with her other novels, with her other war of poetry collections. She is still relevant, even though she was so controversial. Is it? Or do you have other doubt?
Yes, next.
Excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah. Wait a moment. Okay, they are mainstream writers. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, obvious. Okay. Please sit down. So one of the interesting question, but do you still, I will just give one statement. Do you still consider that women's writers are still being considered as not mainstream, but sidelined author? I don't think so. Because in even the canonizations of the syllabi of any university, we have women writers, and we are actually giving the same weightage to the women writers as much we are giving weightage to the man writers. I don't think that even in the present time, we are facing the same issues. It was the case, we can say that in the time of 17th century, that when women started writing works and they come in the printing presses and they try to hide their names. And they actually wrote all those texts by putting their pseudonyms. So it was a time way back in 17th century. But now I don't think even in the 21st century or maybe earlier 20th century, the century that I focused while writing this thesis, that women actually faced any issues. They were given as, they were at same advantageous position, and they were given as a, you can say that focal point or the focused on as much the man writers were. But the ways of dealing with the issues and all those personal experiences, womanly experiences, all those women's writers were different in comparison to men. And just a one simple answer to this simple question is that man has their own experiences, and man knows, as being a different sort of gender, they knows how to deal with their experience. Women's way of dealing with certain issues and tackling with all those issues in her life is different in comparison to man ways. So likewise, you know that how we are dealing with women as being a 21st century women, how we are dealing with outside, inside world of our day-to-day life. And in the same way, man has their own patterns to dealing with. But both of us are facing the certain kind of issues. We cannot say that one's issues is more prominent in comparison to other genders' issues. Is it clear? If yes, then thank you. Please.
Excuse me, ma'am.
So my questions are, either say questions. Can I please? Okay.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Please wait a moment. We are having a questions. Please wait a moment.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay. First of all, I'm answering your question. First of all, I was influenced by these four writers. That's why I took these four women writers as the part of my thesis writings. So I actually read about this women's writer while pursuing masters from Delhi University, some of the confessional poems of Kamala Das, poems of Amrita Pritam. Only one writer, which was new to me in order to write this thesis, was Priti Kumari. So this is also a research gap that I found out while dealing the thesis writing, that Priti Kumari, even in the Patna University, two theses, prior to my thesis, two theses were actually being written on autobiographies. But those two theses was written on man autobiographies, not on women autobiographies. So it was one of the research gap I found out. Second thing is that all three women writers, and there are lot many critical texts and or articles or journals are actually being written on Kamala Das or Amrita Pritam or Indira Goswami's. But only one author or one autobiography which was new to me for this university or for any central university is Prabha Khaitan. These women writers actually not just changed my perspective. I don't think that any authors has this ability to change my perspective because I have my own perspective, I have my own personality. But the thing is that there are certain influences. So no one can just brainwash, you can say, or persuade me to change my entire identity or perspective, but there are certain influences. And it makes me a better person, and it opened up my psyche to look at different horizons of the society from different angles. So this I can say. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Is it? Do I need to repeat it again? I mentioned that in one sections of the thesis. Yeah, please go on.
Yes.
So lot of to write, but we have limited time. अच्छा क्या मतलब बहुत.
Do I need to give answer? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay. The very first thing, it depends on the interest, your area of interest. So there are students or you can say scholars who are more into non-fictions, and there are other sides who are more into fictions. Even since graduation days, I am more into non-fictions. So my supervisor, he actually gave confidence to me that autobiography is as much important for any student or a scholar as other novels or poetry or drama or plays are, or even the critical text or theories. So why we sideline autobiographies? So even in order to teach in any classroom, whenever we start with any text, we give a brief introduction about the author. Even in order to make you comprehend about any theory, we try to give certain background information about authors' lives and times. So that made me question that if we are focusing the very first introductory class on the authors itself, why not just works on the author's lives and time and try to dissect all those socio-political, religious, economical conditions of the authors, and because why these elements shaped author as a person throughout the life, and how these many situations actually shaped us as readers in order to look at author from a different perspective or angle or avenue, per se, we can say. So for me, autobiography is as important as other literary texts because it is also one of the most important segments of, you can say, non-fictions. So we cannot sideline it. That's it. Yeah, your second question. Huh. Okay, comments. You are asking about the similarities between four. Yeah, obviously. So unfortunately, one similarity between all these four women authors is that they had a lifespan, or you can say a decade in their lives, that they suffered from nervous breakdown, anxiety attack. They had a depressive state at one certain point of time in their life. And it was because either of their failed marriages, or maybe you can say that one-sided love, or maybe certain family ruptures, the same common phenomena that in every era women faces or man also faces. So this is the certain similarities at how Indira Goswami, Kamala Das, Prabha Khaitan, or you can say Amrita Pritam. I found out that all those women authors at one point of their life, they visited psychiatry and they actually consulted psychiatrists in their life. And they had failed marriages, failed love life, or you can say failed family values. So these were the things that I found out common in those four women autobiographies. And also how when they had divorces and when they had failed marriages or broken love life, how they were being looked at by all those men of their society. And that's these are the certain similarities that I found out in those women's. That's it.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Sir, can I take one question from here? Please wait a moment. Yeah, please go on.
Ma'am, as you can see that Kamala Das and Sylvia Plath both are the confessional writers. What similarity differences that you find in these two writers in the writing style?
No. Okay. Thank you. Likewise, during our PhD coursework, we had an essay by Helen Sissik's Laugh of the Medusa. Even in this thesis, I actually wrote about Virginia Woolf, Sylvia Plath, Andrea Rich, all those confessional, you can say, poets in comparison with Kamala Das. What I found out that these writers, and you can apply Laugh of the Medusas, Helen Sissik's theory on all those four women autobiographies, if they are confessional poet, obviously there are certain elements. They are outspoken, they are blunt, they are bold, and they write through their bodies. And they actually say us their very lived experiences in their poetry. And that's why their poetry is termed under confessional poems. So these are the similarity. But obviously there is also dissimilarities because we have Indian confessional poets and we have also Western confessional poets. So there, according to the socio-political ambience influences over them, their situations of their maybe personal experiences are different when we compare East confessional poet in comparison to West confessional poet. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, please. Okay, obviously. Is it? Okay. Can I ask one thing from you? Do you really think that all those four literary icons, they are only into feminism or they did a lot? Because you know about Amrita Pritam and she wrote Pinjar. You know about that. And Kamala Das, she was not only popular because of her confessional poets. She also participated in her own state. She also was being the part of the political parties and she fought in one of the elections. But unfortunately, she lost. So I cannot generalize that if I choose these four women authors, so they are only about, we can only discuss about feminism in order to situate these four women autobiographies. So if I will do that, means to say that I am trying to actually making these four women just a feminist women, nothing else. You know about Kamala Das, Amrita Pritam, Indira Goswami, one of the literary icon and stalwart from her own state. So we have, and these women actually been awarded with so many popular awards of India. Okay, Padma Bhushan, Panchu, you can say Gyanpith Award. These are as popular apart from their feminism and they dealt with women questions, women conditions. They actually awared us, but you can also say they just didn't do these things only. One example you can take on is like Indira Goswami. She was also one of the most popular human rights activists in her own state. She fought for animal sacrifices. So you cannot say in order to minimize their contributions to the society that these are only women's writers and they only fought for women's and their contribution is only in the horizon of Indian feminism. They did a lot in order to uplift or elevate your socio-political conditions as well. And they fought for humans in general. That I found out. Thank you. Obviously. Please sit down. First of all, we cannot say this society is a patriarchal society, but we can say that we are dealing with issues of patriarchy because not every man in our society, you can say he is a patriarchal person. So women are also patriarchal. So when we compare man and women, you cannot say that if my husband is a patriarchal, how he is taking care of my baby. So you cannot say that every man is a patriarchal mindsets. He is changing the diaper of my baby every day. And that's why I am here placed. I am working day and night because of his support, even though he has night duty as a doctor. But the thing is that my father, if my father was a patriarchal person, how I became a professor. If my supervisor is a patriarchal person, how I wrote a thesis on feminism or women's condition. So first of all, stop saying this, that every man is a patriarchal. Even I found many women who are patriarchal. Likewise, I found out that women are not supporting other women in order to advance in their career, but men are doing the same thing. So some of my friends are sitting here. You can you can say Satyam, Abhishek, Abde, they are not patriarchal. Obviously, my mother-in-law is a retired principal of one of the most popular schools in Katiyar, and how she actually managed homes and 2 sons, and she actually made 2 sons a doctor and a chartered accountant. No, she is not patriarchal because she is cooking for me, and that's why I am working. So she is not a patriarchal woman. But how these... I am also cooking for her, but during my duty hours, she cooks for me, and after my duty hour, I cooks for her. And this is a sisterhood, we can say, or womanhood, we can say, that how we are taking care of each other. And even mans are also supporting me. That's why I am standing here on. But the thing is that how these women writers actually dealt with patriarchy. Even I am also dealing with everyday patriarchy. But the thing is that one gender is not into patriarchy. Every sorts of genders are into patriarchy. Men are also the victims of patriarchy. Women are also the victims of patriarchy. Both of us are dealing with it. In the same way, these women authors, they actually dealt with patriarchy in their own possible way. And they found out that they were transitional women. First of all, they were not modern women in the sense. They were in the transitional phase, and that's why they are situated in the 20th century. We are also transitional women. We are dealing with everyday sexism. We are dealing with everyday patriarchal issues. But we are trying to be modern. But in every era, there are women who are termed as modern women in their own say. Just by wearing clothes, Western clothes, just by having a Chinese food, you cannot say that you are a modern woman. You need to change in your mindset in order to become a modern woman. You need to change your outlooks in order to call yourself a modern woman. So these women actually question societal issues, whether it was partitions issue, India's Pakistan partition, whether it was Vietnam War, whether it was Gandhian philosophy, whether it was Nehruvian era. These women actually question even all those man authors. Likewise, example of Amrita Pritam. She faced patriarchal issues in the publication house, or while also working as an international organization, she also dealt with other man authors who questions her character and who also did character assassination of Amrita Pritam. So she dealt with all those man authors. So these women had their own experiences, they dealt in their own way, and I am also dealing it my own way. Maybe we will win in some way. Okay, thank you.
They also must be dealing with the same.
Yeah, obviously. Ways are different, issues are same.
Are there any more questions from research scholars? Yes.
No, this is one of the important questions. Likewise, Parva Khetan's autobiography, A Life Apart. Parva Khetan, she stayed in a relationship with a married man, and that man was a doctor. And she was a kept wife, legally excluded, wedded wife, you can say. Parva Khetan was in love with a man throughout her life. She stayed with a man who was already married and having children from first wife. And she, apart from these personal issues, she started one of the leather business in Kolkata, and she was from Marwari community. So she had own professional crisis in her life. So she was placed in the very 20th century. And when she started her leather business or the beauty products business, she actually went to America in order to learn and was participating in a certain organization about how to generate leather products in India. But what she found out, whether it was America or Hong Kong or being in India, everywhere she found out one common issue that women dealt with. Everyday sexism while working in any professional sector, while working in any corporate sector, while even in an academy. So she also dealt with all these issues as being a businesswoman. So apart from her personal life crises, she was a businesswoman and an elite businesswoman, you can say. And she dealt with class issues, community issues as being a Marwari, and also struggles of Bengal. Likewise, I mentioned socio-political conditions of Bengal, how Communist Party in that era tried to swap out Bengals, and how Parva Khetan situated her own business and her issues in all those political hotbed of Bengal. So these were the things that I dealt in the thesis.
And so how will you differentiate the mainstream Indian autobiographies from marginal life narratives. For example, so how will you differentiate between these two mainstream Indian autobiographies written by all these men and women and the marginal life narratives? For example, African American life narratives or Dalit life narratives.
So first of all, in order to talk about the scope of research, I mentioned about these things asked by Sir. I mentioned in the scope of research that here I focused on all those 4 women autobiographies, and these are from upper class, you can say, elite class women authors. They are empowered women in a sense. That's why they are able to write autobiographies and lot many texts, and they were being participated in many movements and organizations and revolutions in society. But in the present time, I left one scope for the future scholar that they can also write their thesis on marginalized women. Likewise, in your syllabus, we have Bama. Otherwise, we have lot many examples of women. Even in my amphil thesis, I dealt with a marginalized women. Even my amphil dissertation is based on 2 women autobiographies. And those 2 women autobiographies, they are marginalized women. One was the autobiography of a sex worker of Kerala, and the other autobiography was a domestic worker. You must have heard about Baby Haldar and Nalini Jamila. So I cannot say that I just wrote my PhD thesis on all those 4 empowered upper class literary figures. But previously, I actually did the same thing. I wrote amphil dissertation on marginalized women. And I left one scope for future researcher that there are not many autobiographies written by transgender women, Dalit women, Muslims women, lower class women. So we can also focus on those things just by keeping this thesis as a, you can say, a platform as a background information. We can build on more on that.
But you didn't say anything about, can you say anything about those life narratives?
Okay, so are you asking
for example, life narratives by mainstream female writers and Dalit women writers. So what is the difference between them? Can you say a little bit about that?
Okay. So the level of discriminations vary from one woman to another woman. Like, if she is from Indra Goswami, she is a Brahmin author, so she never faced class discrimination or the caste discrimination because she was also one of the upper class. But when it comes to a women Dalit writer or her autobiography, you can take an example of Bama. So their levels of discrimination may vary, or they are different from the upper class women author. Bama has 4-fold level of discrimination. So when caste discrimination is there, another level of caste discrimination is there. And gender discrimination is, every time we talk about women. So gender discrimination is common for upper class and Dalit women. But what about the class discrimination or the caste discrimination? Even the discrimination based on your religion is also there. So if Indra Goswami is Brahmin women author, so she never faced any sort of discrimination. But Bama, in case of Bama, if she had changed the religious identity, there are 2 levels of discrimination. The previous religious identity and the present religious identity. So 4 discriminations are there in case of Dalit women or marginalized women. But in case of people like Indra Goswami, they are only gender discrimination, you can say, or discrimination related to being a widow in Indian society. So 2 discriminations are there, and there are 4 levels of discrimination.
Okay.
Since you have dealt with the autobiographies of these 4 women, right?
Which autobiography of the women writer appealed you the most? The reasons for that?
Okay. So for me, okay. So I think I am an admixture of all those 4 women. I am not one woman. If I will try to lens my personality or identity, I am neither Prabha Khaitan nor Amrita Pritam or Kamala Das or Indra Goswami. But there are certain elements that is there in me, obviously. And that's why I'm trying to associate with these 4 women. So there are certain elements that I find out in me from all those 4 women authors. And I have an admixtures. I am an example of admixtures of all those 4 women, not one in particular.
Which one was the most appealing to you out of these 4 women writers?
Sir, Amrita Pritam. I live like a life of Amrita Pritam. But
language is gender.
Mhm.
So when a woman turns to writing, she doesn't find any sentence readily available for the use. So how these writers cope with this problem?
Obviously. Likewise, I read about Julia Kristeva and I also read about Spivak. These two women theories, they dealt with, we can say that, gendered language in our canonization of slavery as well as in our day-to-day life occurrences. The thing is that if women is writing her autobiography, there are chances that they will try to mimic man's language because we are in a habit to write in gender-specific language instead of gender-neutralized language. But if as a women writer, we are more aware that we can do away with these gender-specified words or terminologies or grammar, and we can be very specific about gender-neutralized language, we can do this thing. So we are still struggling with that how to do away or shun away gender-specified terminology and man-specified terminology and focus more on gender-neutralized terminology. So that's why we are in a very transitional phase, that how can we write a text more about women's feelings in a women's language, in a more gender-neutralized language. That's it.
Any more questions? Now I request the supervisor, Professor Samir Kumar Sharma, to put questions to her. Almost a ritual. Please perform this ritual.
Yes, Priti. Lots of questions were asked, and you tried your level best to answer the questions. I would like to form the ritual of asking certain questions, which I suppose you will answer. The first thing is that George Bernard Shaw said that all autobiographies were lies. And surprisingly enough, he also wrote autobiography. Number two, the questions were raised regarding autobiography and fiction. If we try to find out the truth in literature, because we know that in order to understand history, literary source is also one of the most important sources. So why are people putting questions on autobiography, whether truth is there or what is the percentage of truth, 50, 50, 60. And there are certain autobiographies. For example, Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography, by experimental truth. There was a time when that was prescribed for the students of undergraduate students. And Subhash Chandra Bose's autobiography, Pilgrim's Journey of Capitalism or Pilgrim's Progress. And there are certain autobiographies that have brought drastic change in the life of people. So, for example, Tolstoy and autobiography. So why can't autobiography be given the status of full-fledged literary work of art? If romantic poetry being subjective can be regarded as great work, and if critics say that if personal experiences become so much intensely personal, they no longer remain personal, rather they are universalized. And if they are universalized, that becomes pure literature. Yes, your certain observations about it. If the four writers have written their autobiography based on their experiences, why can't they be considered as great works of art?
So for me, it is a great work of art. And these are the example of mainstream literature. I cannot say that non-fiction's writing or autobiography is not the example of mainstream literature or canonized literature. They are also a part of great narratives or grand narratives, according to F.R. Lewis. So I can say that we should change our perspective. Why we always consider novels, poems, plays, and drama and poetry as mainstream literary text, why not we consider autobiography as mainstream literary text? So even in order to sanction any author, we need to consult his or her autobiographies or memoir. If not these two pieces of writings, then at least biography. How can we deal with any sort of genres, whether it's your poems or novel, drama, play, short story, poetry? How can we will be able to deal with these different sorts of genre if we want consult autobiography or biographies or memoir or life narratives, biomythographies written by or on authors? So for me, that's why we can say that autobiographies should be considered as mainstream literature, and most of the people actually consider it as mainstream literature.
Perhaps you might have consulted one book that is written by Dr. R.C.P. Sinha, who was former professor and head of the Department of English, Patna University. He worked on Indian autobiographies in English. And that book, when published, caught the attention of so many critics, and so many works were done on autobiographies in PhD, and some other places. In what ways do you find that your work is a new departure from whatever ideas established by Dr. R.C.P. Singh?
Okay. So 2 theses are written in this university on autobiographies, including the R.C.P. Sinha sir's work. He dealt with man's autobiographies. Anglo-Indians, you can say that Anglo-Anglican autobiographies written by man in India. He didn't, at any one point of the time, he didn't deal with women's autobiographies or Indian women autobiographies or women autobiographies from West. In his thesis, changed into a text. So that I found a line of departure.
Which women autobiography was written at that time when R.C.P. Sinha was doing the research?
So very first, one of the autobiography written by Bengali women in Bengal, and the name is the same. My Story is the name of the autobiography. I'm not able to remember the name of the author, but Bengal, the very first full-fledged autobiography written by Bengali women in Bengal, even before R.C.P. Sinha wrote his autobiography. So there was certain existing women's autobiography. It was there in Bengal. And then after R.C.P. Sinha, we also have launched many autobiographies. So he wrote the thesis in maybe in 20th century in the very beginning phase. Prior to that, we have women autobiographies. So I forgot the name of the author, but the name of the autobiography is by the same name, My Story, in Bengal. The very first women autobiography is in India written even before R.C.P. Sinha wrote his thesis.
Okay, madam, much has been asked, much has been answered. Now the final ritual has to be performed.
Now we have come to the end of Ph.D. Viva-Voce of Priti Kumari Choudhary, and I request Professor Bhavatosh Indraguru, our external examiner, to congratulate Priti.
Priti stands congratulated. Congratulations to her.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Now we have come to the end of this Ph.D. Viva-Voce.
All right. I should like to take your leave, madam, now. All right. I should like to take your leave, madam. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
How many years do you
I don't know. I'm exhausted.
Just one article was 2 years to democracy. How many years do you need?
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
फोटो ले